A good morning to all of you. I'm delighted to be welcoming you to the third annual Women, Peace and Leadership Symposium on securing women's leadership in post-pandemic life. And we are very proud to be organizing this event series in partnership with the government of Sweden. The symposium on women, peace and leadership is held each September at IPI during the high-level debate of the General Assembly, the UN General Assembly, and focuses on the important role gender plays in peace and security. We are honored to have with us this morning a highly distinguished panel, including Ann Linde, Minister of Foreign Affairs of Sweden. Welcome. Åsa Regner, Assistant Secretary General of the United Nations and Deputy Executive Director of UN Women. Welcome. Alta Jajka, Minister for Europe and Foreign Affairs of Albania. Netumbo Nandi Daitwa, Deputy Prime Minister and Minister for International Relations and Cooperation of the Republic of Namibia. Katrina Fotova, from the Office of Global Women's Issues in the U.S. Department of State, who is joining us virtually. Good morning. And Dr. Sarah Taylor, Director of International Policy Strategy and Women, Peace and Security at Inclusive Peace. Now, COVID-19 has not just revealed, but exacerbated global inequalities along gender lines, particularly in contexts characterized by conflict and fragility. And as the global community grapples with recovery and simultaneously seeks to build resilience against future crises, we need to develop ways to rectify structural gender inequalities. We urgently need new approaches to move beyond rhetoric and merely symbolic recognition. Women's leadership and their contributions need to be incorporated into creating a more equitable post-pandemic international community. So some of the questions we hope to address today will include: what long-term negative consequences of the pandemic do we risk for women's rights, activism, and leadership opportunities across the political and peace-building spheres? What policies, reforms, and innovative solutions can be put in place to reduce long-term harmful side effects and build on the leadership and key roles shouldered by women during the pandemic? Today is an important opportunity for us to highlight the leadership of women and explore how their voices can further be amplified and formally recognized. I look forward to the insights of our distinguished panelists and that they will share with us this morning. And I now turn the floor over to Ann Linde, Minister for Foreign Affairs of Sweden. Your Excellency, you have the floor.
Thank you very much. Dear friends, dear colleagues, welcome to this symposium on women, peace and leadership. It's a great pleasure for Sweden and me personally to host you together with the International Peace Institute. The theme of our meeting is urgent. The pandemic has meant a clear reversion for gender equality, with severe consequences for women and girls' situation and prospects. It has even come to a called she-recession instead of a recession, since women's economic circumstances have been so severely affected. On top of that, the pandemic has coincided with further shrinking of the democratic space, a space that is crucial for all, but not least for the women who often lack access to formal means of influence and decision-making. This negative trend must firmly be countered by supporting and securing women's leadership and influence through both broad and targeted efforts. Let me begin our exchange by mentioning some examples of how Sweden works. First, we work with mainstreaming so that we can maximize our impact by involving the whole foreign service. Our feminist foreign policy means that we apply a gender perspective to all parts of our work with the aim of enhancing global gender equality and the rights, representation, and resources of all women and girls. We try to walk the talk, including by having a gender perspective on appointments as well as budgeting. Another cross-cutting effort is our drive for democracy, which mutually reinforces the feminist foreign policy and makes it possible for us to give extra focus to the shrinking democratic space. Second, we use all available platforms to push for women's influence and participation by using the same kind of systematic approach that we use on ourselves. As a member of the Security Council in 2017 and 18, we consistently sought to ensure that the Council included a focus on VPS in all discussions and decisions. We also pushed for the Council to be briefed by civil society representatives, and during Sweden's presidency in July 2018, we ensured gender balance among those briefing the Council for the first time ever. We applied the same systematic approach to the world's largest regional organization, the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe, OSCE, where I currently am the chair. This means that we integrate a gender perspective to policy discussions in Vienna as well on the mission on the fields. This is something I stressed during my visits, including through requesting meetings with local women and civil society organizations. I also ask all heads of mission to integrate a VPS perspective in the reports. Cooperation between OSCE and the United Nations is important, and I'm very proud that I and Ms. Regner made a common visit to Kosovo to have the team Women, Peace and Security, where we met several women organizations in the field. Women's economic empowerment is an important part of this. I have also established a group of experts to advise me on how to further strengthen the Women, Peace and Security agenda within the OSCE. And third, we target the issue of women's participation and leadership at all levels and in different ways. Our example is our initiative to set up a mechanism and a network for women peace builders and mediators to promote women's influence and see to that the informal and formal tracks and dialogue are interlinked. The Swedish Women's Mediators Network, one of the first of its kind, but now followed by others, is one example. We also contribute with core support to both international and local women rights organizations so that they can support women to organize, take on leadership roles, and tackle crises like the one in Afghanistan. We also focus on accelerating women's participation in ongoing peace processes, not least in Yemen, as a follow-up to the Stockholm Agreement. These measures have helped us to make headway, and we are dedicated to continue to develop our methods and to promote women's leadership and influence. I very much look forward to hearing about and learning from your equivalent efforts to inspire our future work. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Minister, for that important statement. I'd like to turn the floor now to Assistant Secretary General of the United Nations and Deputy Executive Director of UN Women, Åsa Regner. Åsa, you have the floor.
Thank you, Zeid. Thank you, Excellencies, Ministers, Member States present, colleagues, everybody listening and participating online. It's an honor to be here today. This is a very important and timely topic. From UN Women's side, we have done several follow-ups of one, the Beijing platform, 25 years after its adoption in 1995, as well as 20 years of the Security Council Resolution 1325. And on this particular topic, women in decision-making, women's participation in public life, unfortunately, we can not see that the goals that the world community set up, the UN member states set up at those occasions have been fulfilled. However, we do see that there is more and more interest, more and more knowledge, even more and more reforms and legislation put forward. But the lack of follow-up and implementation, and thus change in reality, is worrying. This year's Commission on the Status of Women was exactly on this topic, women in decision-making, both in peacetime and in conflict and in general. This we did also in the context of the COVID-19 pandemic. From UN Women's side, we have also followed up what happened to women and men respectively during the COVID-19 pandemic and its socioeconomic consequences for them. There is a lot of information on our homepage, and I don't have time to go through it, but as Minister Linde said, we can clearly see that women were harder hit socioeconomically than men. Inequalities which were there due to class, gender, belonging to a minority or not, etc., were exacerbated by the crisis. Although women worked literally 24/7 to save the lives of the rest of us, 70% of the world's health workers, for example, but also women in pharmacies, in agriculture, in child, in elderly care, etc. But thus and so far, we cannot see that they were even paid what most of us would think is good for that important and life-saving work. We cannot see that women's incomes have increased. In fact, women as a group have been harder hit economically than men by the pandemic. Because the majority of women work in the informal sector, not protected by social securities, health insurances, and unemployment benefits, etc. Also, when we took stock, we saw that in the world average women in parliaments is only 25%. And the EU average, for example, is 1 or 2%, higher than that, but not more. So there is a lot still to do. I think, therefore, that the Secretary General's Common Agenda, which points a lot to fighting inequalities of different kinds, included gender inequalities, and to set up a new social contract in the world, responding to all of these inequalities and working with them with more of social inclusion and welfare measures, I think is very timely. When we come to the crisis setting, to come to conclusions of this, we've seen that many conflicts have re-emerged or sparked these last year and months. We all have Afghanistan in our minds, of course, but unfortunately there are more conflicts we need to tend to, and Minister Linde and many of you are traveling around the world to help in this. And we are happy from our side to work with different partnerships. The OSCE partnership is one important of those, so I'm very grateful for that. When it comes to women in peace building and women in peace talks, as we know, also there, very encouraging. Lots of member states are taking part in those discussions. We have more and more countries taking on the feminist foreign policies. We have now 70% of the resolutions with language on women's rights and situation coming out of the Security Council. But again, we cannot see implementation on the ground. We cannot see speedy enough uptake when it comes to women in peace talks, women as signatories, as mediators, etc. in reality. And I know my colleague Sarah will speak more about what we, from UN Women's side, suggest we can do about that. And we have a compact on women, peace and security for member states to engage in, and we also soon have the open debate in the Security Council. So the issues we discussed here are very important for women also in conflicts. They often tell us livelihoods, super important, their own income. We know protection from violence, both the violence that often increase within the homes from men towards women, as well as the violence caused by the conflict. And of course, in this and the context of COVID, access to health and because of other health reasons as well. Maternal mortality is often spiking in crisis. So there is a lot to do, and I'm really happy we're all here trying to discuss how we can move this further and faster ahead. Thank you.
Thank you, Åsa, for your remarks. I'd like to turn the floor over now to the Minister for Europe and Foreign Affairs of Albania, Ms. Olta Gjajka. Your Excellency, you have the floor.
Dear Minister Linde, dear Mr. President of the International Peace Institute, I thank you very much for this opportunity to participate in this high-level discussion to highlight the need to amplify the leadership of women and women's vital contributions in the crisis response across the globe. The COVID-19 pandemic, as many of you duly noted, exacerbated existing gender inequalities, causing rising violence against women and girls globally, and disproportionate negative economic consequences. The pandemic hit women especially, but in particular those already in conflict and crisis-affected situations. Eliminating violence against women in all of its forms remain a key challenge and a priority, even in my country, and it requires long-term engagement and investments. Recent legal improvements have increased protection and aim to enforce their role. Social protection and social inclusion of women remain in the core of Albanian legal framework and policy action. Albania continues to prioritize the elimination of discriminatory gender norms and practices that limit leadership and full participation of women in political institutions and the public life. The central government of Albania has reached full gender parity with 3/4 of ministerial positions held by women. The current parliament features the largest representation of women in the past 30 years, with some 35% of representativeness, while women represent 50% of local municipal councils. Women representation is also increasing steadily, I should say, in the armed forces and in the police. We have realized that progress in the gender equality agenda have been also due to the partnership between the institutions, civil society and international actors in our country. We also realize that the most effective ways to achieve sustainable peace and security in the world is through a consistent focus on the strengthened implementation of the Women, Peace and Security Agenda, ensuring more inclusive peace processes, gender equality, women's empowerment and protection of women's rights. Albania, as an elected non-permanent member of the Security Council, will champion the Women, Peace and Security Agenda across the full breadth of the Security Council's work. Putting women and girls at the center of peace and security is a good investment in the long-lasting and more sustainable peace. We will make women, peace and security a cross-cutting issue and include it in all country-specific discussions and mandates, as well as thematic discourse. Women have unique skills and perspectives, and their participation in conflict prevention and peacemaking has proved to contribute to the longevity of peace processes around the world. So Albania will support the full, equal, and meaningful participation of women in all peace and security efforts, from peacemaking to peacekeeping and peace building, and their involvement from the earliest stages in every peace and political process that the United Nations supports. We will also use our position in the Security Council to ensure the full implementation of the existing Security Council resolutions on women, peace and security, and will request briefers as well as UN leadership to systematically share gender analysis and information about concrete efforts to ensure women's equal participation in all areas of conflict prevention and peace building. We will also advocate for the voice of women civil society organizations and human rights defenders to be heard, as well as for the perspective of women at grassroots levels to be taken into account in relevant council outcome and deliberation. At the national level, we are committed to the implementation of UN Security Council Resolution 1325. We have adopted a costed and budgeted national action plan and have increased the participation of women in the security sector. As part of these efforts, Albania will also strengthen the Council's actions and commitments to combating conflict-related sexual violence. The use of sexual violence as a tactic of war and terror continues to be a common element in conflicts around the world, and in our region we are not unfamiliar to that. During the last decade of the 20th century, the Balkans, our region, has witnessed firsthand how sexual violence is being used as a weapon of war and the challenges faced by post-conflict societies in dealing with the collective and individual trauma. Addressing sexual and gender-based violence in post-conflict situations is also vital to promoting justice and reconciliation, as well as achieving sustainable peace. So Albania will work to strengthen the survivor-centered approach and to better integrate preventive and early warnings mechanisms, as well as accountability measures. We'll also work on putting an end to impunity in cases of conflict-related sexual violence. So within the framework of the Women, Peace and Security agenda, Albania will engage in strengthening the work of the Security Council and our collective response in protecting the rights of the survivors, as well as ensuring accountability for perpetrators, including through the use of sanctions and ad hoc justice mechanisms. Our work will focus on turning resolutions into results. Thank you very much for your kind attention.
Thank you, Minister, for your important statement. I'd like to turn the floor over now to the Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of the International Relations and Cooperation of Namibia, Netumbo Nandi Daitwa. Your Excellency, you have the floor.
The Minister from Sweden, the President of the IPI, dear panelists and all participants. First, I would like to thank the government of Sweden and the International Peace Institute for organizing this discussion. And this is very important, particularly at this moment. And before I go further, I must say, it's like becoming a tradition that whenever I come to the General Assembly, there's always an event at this center, and I'm one of the participants. The Women, Peace and Security agenda is one of the Namibians' foreign policy priorities, as it's part of the parity. And Namibia is always ready to participate in the discussion on the subject matter. As you might recall, over 21 years ago, when Namibia was a member of the Security Council, we introduced the discussion on women and peace in the Security Council. And we chaired the session in October that adopted the United Nations Security Council Resolution 1325. We introduced the discussion as at the time we believed that women were considered as helpless victims in conflict situation. But we knew from our own experience that given the opportunity, women have the capacity to offer solutions in conflict situation. At the high-level review on the implementation of Resolution 1325 in October 2015, the Security Council concluded that where women have fully participated in peacemaking and conflict resolution, peace agreements are more lasting. Therefore, Namibia will continue to lead on women, peace and security agenda, as we believe is the only way through this agenda that the world peace can be sustained. In October 2020, we celebrated the 20th anniversary of the adoption of Resolution 1325 by opening an International Women Peace Center in Windhoek. I'm very happy to share this platform with Sarah, who has helped us, and I believe she will continue to work with us as we are developing the activities of the International Women Peace Center in Windhoek. The International Women Peace Center's objective is to be a center of excellence which will work towards advocacy for the Women Peace agenda, networking and draw partnership, and also build capacities and training. We have a collective responsibility to ensure the participation of women in all layers of governance. Networking with similar institutions, the center will also be able to look at the root cause of conflict for the situation to be arrested before it brings misery to the people. In 1990, as a newly independent young nation, Namibian women made up only 4.6% of the National Assembly. This was a result of the UN-supervised elections in 1989. Currently, this number has risen to 47%. We are confident that this number will continue to increase in the coming years with the goal of achieving full gender parity within Parliament. And this has come possible because in 2013, the ruling party SWAPO took a bold decision and introduced what we call in Namibia zebra list, which is 50-50, that increased women representation on the party list, that has now brought the number to 47%. Should all political parties adopt the same, definitely we are going to reach the 50-50%. We therefore find it appropriate that member states are encouraged to develop mechanisms which will improve gender equality at all levels of decision making. In the economic sector, in accordance to our policies, all the laws that we are passing in Parliament, with particular reference to the laws establishing parastatals, gender parity is always included. Therefore, we have increased the number of women in the boardrooms. Securing women's leadership in post-pandemic, being the topic of today, is very important, as women have experienced a disproportionate impact of the pandemic. And the same can be said about the youth. When the pandemic came, many of the schools were closed, if not all, thus making it difficult for women to choose whether to go to work or to take care of the children. The businesses were closed, including the informal sector. The majority of women are the informal sector, which is like living from hand to mouth. When they were closed, they had to struggle to feed their families. Similarly, the majority of the people lost their jobs, and that means few food coming into the families, thus leaving women to find a way how they can feed their families. Therefore, I have to say frankly, as much as it's very important for us to discuss women's leadership in the post-pandemic life, for a country like Namibia and many others in the South, with particular reference to Africa, we are far from post-pandemic world. Over the last years, and since the beginning of the coronavirus pandemic, we have witnessed self-interest behavior from those we believe would work together to combat the pandemic. Namibia has suffered 3 devastating waves of the pandemic, with loss of lives, economic downturn, and our development trajectory being almost halted in some respect. However, as the world developed vaccine, we witnessed vaccine nationalism, with most of African left at the mercy of COVID-19, while the developed world secure vaccine for themselves. Namibia has followed multilateral cooperation signed on COVAX facility and has paid its due, Yet, we have had to wait prolonged period to receive our share and have instead relied on the good partnership we have built to support our national vaccination efforts. This situation is not unique to Namibia, and across Africa is the same. Most disheartening is trying to explain to our nationals why development projects are on hold, as the development budget is realigned to cater for pressing needs such as taking care of the sick, and they are not see tangible result of broader access to vaccination. The World Health Organization has the opinion that unless the supply for vaccine improve, the target of vaccinating 10% of the people in Africa by the end of September will not be achieved. Meanwhile, many, if not all countries in the South, the developed countries, over 50% of their population are vaccinated. We have watching the soccer summer in Europe, and we have seen how the stadiums were packed. Meanwhile, ourselves, we are still on the mask and the lockdowns, simply because many of our citizens are not yet vaccinated. Therefore, it's sometimes difficult to speak about post-pandemic lives when one half of the world is moving forward, while another part, mainly the global South, remain behind on the combating the pandemic. We cannot maintain any gains we have made in the women's participation or leadership if we cannot secure their health and livelihood because the pandemic is being prolonged. Namibia holds fast to the belief that women's political participation and representation is central to equitable and sustainable development. However, that potential cannot be realized when the developing world is still fighting a global pandemic while others begin to rebuild their society in a post-pandemic world. We should therefore make use of the multilateral institution to move together as we prepare ourselves for the post-pandemic and a better future for all, in which women should have a significant role to play, including the young women. I thank you.
Thank you, Your Excellency, for your statement and for the very appropriate criticism of us who live in the global north for the positions that we've taken. So I think we all take it to heart. I'd like to turn the floor over now to Katrina Fotova, the senior official in the Office of Global Women's Issues, the U.S. Department of State, to deliver your remarks. Kat, please, you have the floor.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much, President Al-Hussein and the International Peace Institute, and to Minister Linde and the government of Sweden for hosting this event. It is a pleasure to speak alongside such illustrious panel members. Your Excellencies, my honor to join you today, and thank you for your fantastic words. My name is Kat Fotovat. I am the senior official in the Secretary's Office of Global Women's Issues at the U.S. Department of State. I am happy to be with you today to discuss women's leadership in what hopefully will be a post-pandemic world, and to dig deeper into the critical topic of today's discussion, how women's leadership can and must be amplified formally to be recognized in times of conflict and crisis. This is a particularly timely topic after yesterday's COVID-19 summit that was hosted by President Biden. President Biden and Vice President Harris have made it very clear that advancing gender equality and equity is a matter of human rights and is a strategic imperative for the United States. Gender equality reduces poverty, increases access to education, improves health, and fosters democracy, all of which help the global community build back better from COVID-19. This administration is not only deeply convinced of the need to marshal the whole of government to drive gender equality, we are deeply committed to doing so. On International Women's Day this year, President Biden announced an executive order which formally established a White House Gender Policy Council, reporting directly to the president. As many of you already know, this council represents one of the most significant elevations of gender equality priorities within the administration to date. We intend to take this whole of government effort throughout the administration. This council not only reports to the president, but also works directly with the Domestic Policy Council and the National Economic Council and the National Security Council to cover both domestic and global priorities, and to do so by ensuring a focus on gender equity and equality, including gender budgeting, is included around the world in our efforts. In the executive order, President Biden asked for a national strategy to be finalized within 200 days. This has been the Gender Policy Council's first big task, to coordinate, draft, and then help implement a government-wide strategy to advance gender equality and equity through domestic, foreign policy goals, and against which each agency will be asked to report on their progress annually. We know that this work is especially important in the context of the COVID-19 pandemic, as we are discussing today. We are concerned about the long-term negative consequences that the pandemic will have on women's leadership and involvement in opportunities across the board. In the United States alone, approximately 3 million women left the workforce during the pandemic. And we know this trend was seen globally. While women make up 39% of global employment, they accounted for 54% of overall job losses. This has significant implications, not only on individual and familial levels, but also on global GDP. Many of these statistics are familiar, and as a global community, it is our responsibility to act on the data and the evidence as we have to build a better future. However, some of these stories are unfamiliar. Women are 70% of the global health workforce, but underrepresented in leadership, clustered into lower status, lower paid jobs, and commonly subjected to harassment. Women leaders around the world have unfortunately faced intimidation and violence, especially in their roles in the COVID-19 response and recovery. Women, peace, and security efforts, of which women's leadership is a critical focus, must be understood and implemented within this context. In other words, COVID-19 presents a threat to our collective security, as well as our health. This is why we will continue to double down on the implementation of our Women, Peace, and Security law and strategy by signing on earlier this year to the WPS Humanitarian Compact and the Generation Equality Forum. We are excited to play a part in harnessing WPS globally and advancing the agenda forward, especially during and after the COVID-19 pandemic. Earlier this year, the US government released our first ever report on the implementation of the US strategy on women, peace, and security, covering many topics we are discussing today. Available to the public, this report spans from October 2018 to September 2020 and demonstrated significant gains on advancing WPS elements, such as women's participation in leadership, and led to tangible impacts on women and girls around the world. Our Women, Peace, and Security efforts also focus on the importance of gender analysis and meaningful participation and leadership of women. For example, our efforts to promote and increase women's political participation and meaningful participation in conflict and security decision-making processes span the globe. US foreign assistance programs promoted women's participation in peacebuilding in Kosovo, Yemen, and beyond. In Yemen, for example, we invested in participation of women, youth, and underrepresented groups in political transitions and across transnational governance bodies. In East Africa, we advanced women's leadership in preventing and countering violent extremism by supporting a cross-border network of women leaders. These networks of community women leaders we worked with were vital, trusted sources of community leadership during the pandemic on issues not just about security, but about COVID-19, and provided life-saving best practices and credible information. The secondary impacts of COVID-19 have also contributed to the conditions that exacerbated conflict and inequality, which has implications for our ongoing efforts to resolve and prevent conflict and further illuminated the gender digital divide, including not just the lack of access to digital technology and internet access, but the very way in which women experience online life. The pandemic has also not come without learned opportunities. It forced us to embrace digital technology and virtual connections, which allowed for more flexibility for women to participate. We have seen online events broaden to wider groups of stakeholders, provide opportunities to elevate the voices of women leaders from around the world, and expand our global networks. This increased engagement is something we are committed to continuing to ensure all those with a stake have opportunities to participate and lead equitably and safely. As we continue to navigate the current environment and think ahead to the post-pandemic world, we have identified 3 principles that have informed our efforts. First, one of the lessons we learned from our series of roundtables on COVID-19 with women civil society leaders, and also frankly in our own experience of the pandemic in the United States, is the centrality of trust to all these efforts, which women leaders provide. We need to continue and increase our work with and through local organizations that have established relationships and trust with their local communities. Fostering the leadership of local women and organizations and empowering local civil society ensures our efforts are informed by local context and community needs. Secondly, we must continue to press for improved and expanded data, including sex disaggregation, to inform our response and recovery. The gender-sensitive approach is critical for addressing the outsized and disproportionate impact the pandemic has had on women and girls globally. Women in Global Health identified this as a need to strengthen response to COVID-19 and prepare for future pandemics, and has called on WHO member states, international NGOs, and the global health research community to adopt a gender-responsive approach to health security data and collection and analysis. Finally, COVID-19 is a reminder of the importance of applying an intersectional lens to best respond to the unique needs of individuals who are multiply marginalized due to their background or identity. It is imperative that the response and recovery efforts are inclusive, equitable, and most importantly, do not harm those we seek to support. The pandemic has highlighted the significant investments needed to ensure safety, rights, and the leadership of women and girls around the world must be a huge part of that effort. It has also underscored the importance of ensuring that these investments are equitable, because the impact of COVID-19 was not. At the core of the WPS agenda is a commitment to advancing women's leadership, investing in local communities, and adopting a holistic approach to comprehensively addressing issues and barriers impending and impeding women's advancement. These commitments must carry over to the COVID-19 response and recovery. It is incumbent upon all of us to invest in women's leadership and participation to recover from COVID-19. They will be the engines that drive our global recovery, and they are needed in local, regional, national, and international leadership positions to help transform our governance structures and influence decision-making processes. We look forward to continuing to work alongside partners and make sure the progress on this critical agenda continues. Thank you again for this opportunity to participate in today's event alongside these esteemed panelists, and I look forward to discussing further later in this program. Thank you.
Thank you, Kat, for your intervention. And finally, I have the pleasure of turning the floor over to Dr. Sarah Taylor, Director of the International Strategy and WPS Inclusive Peace. Sarah?
Thank you so much. It is really wonderful to be here today with all of you. Just to note that I am a director at Inclusive Peace. At the moment, I'm on leave and working with UN Women. So I will be speaking, as has already noted, I'll be speaking on some of the policy opportunities and actions that we can recommend for the international community. But before I do that, I want to take a step back and reflect on some of the analyses that we've already heard. And from a woman, peace, and security, humanitarian action perspective, think about what we need to do. What is it that we're actually talking about, what we as an international community need to do to support women's rights advocates and activists, to support women's organizations, to build back institutions into ways that they are equitable, that they are inclusive, so that we're not seeing this capture of women overrepresented at non-decision-making levels and underrepresentation of women at decision-making levels in all sectors. As we've already discussed today and touched on slightly, this is an urgent matter. We all are holding Afghanistan at the forefront of our minds and of our hearts. We also need to hold in our minds and our hearts the various humanitarian crises and conflict settings, like, for example, Haiti, which has experienced not only political turmoil, but humanitarian disasters in the shape of an earthquake, most recently in a country where women are massively underrepresented in decision-making positions. So we need to remember that this issue around women's leadership, around women's participation, is a global one and requires a global response. So, a couple of things. One of the things I've been really interested in hearing already today from our colleagues is this issue around how to support women's participation and leadership in policy settings. And so I just wanted to flag that, building on the Swedish model of during their time in the Security Council, that the sort of competition, the soft competition to who can have more women briefers, civil society briefers, who can ensure that policy directives are gender responsive and gender sensitive. I think that is an incredibly wonderful kind of competition that I would love to support and see more of. But also looking at the example from Namibia in terms of what are the temporary special measures, what are the measures that governments can take to support women's leadership in all sectors. So this is an idea that has been discussed, for example, in multiple fora, not just in terms of quotas for lists for political appointees and elected officials, but also to look at how we can leverage some of these methods for peace processes, right? So how can we start looking at track 3, track 2, track 1.5, track 1 processes to make sure that there is a driving push and a requirement and indeed an international norm on ensuring women's full and meaningful and equal participation in these processes. Another thing we really need to talk about is we've discussed a lot here about the devastating economic impact that the pandemic has had on women. And as noted, we have this devastating data on the impact on women and the informal sector. And I think what we need to do is we really need to start engaging, particularly from the Women, Peace and Security and Humanitarian Action side. We need to make sure that we're engaging with the private sector, for example, to make sure that we are engaging in a way that drives forward the institutional and normative change in these sort of non-traditional for women, peace, and security sectors to move change on women's economic empowerment. We also need to recognize the trajectory of where inequalities embed themselves. So this is not about arriving at a track 1 process for a peace process, or arriving at the point where a humanitarian appeal has gone out and suddenly realizing that there are no women there, that they are not gender responsive to the degree that they need to be. This is about ensuring that all of us at every level, in all of the preparation, in all of the pre-processes, which can be years, right? That we are building women's participation in, that we are consulting with women's rights organizations and women's civil society organizations, supporting women peace builders, providing protection. So that brings me to my 4th point. Getting through this rapidly. My 4th point on the inextricable link between protection and participation. We absolutely must recognize that women political leaders are subject to particular types of attack, be it, as was noted already, in terms of online attack, physical attacks, attacks on their good character. This is also an issue for women's rights and women peace builders. Unfortunately, data that came out of UNAMA in Afghanistan before the events of August showed that in 2020, it was the most dangerous year for women in Afghanistan since records started being kept. So even before the devastating impact and events of August, women were already facing unprecedented levels of particular targeting for their actual involvement in political processes, for pushing for peace. So we have to recognize that these things are interlinked. It's also a matter of humanitarian service provision. We must recognize that in order to provide proper services in a humanitarian crisis, women and girls need to be at the center of the decision-making of what services are provided, how they're provided, to whom they're provided, and that women are actually being able to provide those services on the ground. So, with all of that in mind, I just want to flag a little bit of what to do, and this gets me to the issue of the Women, Peace and Security and Humanitarian Action Compact. So I'm delighted, of course, that Namibia as a board member is here, is represented, that Sweden as a catalytic member is chairing this meeting, that the US as a signatory is joining this meeting, and hopefully maybe we can discuss another signatory at some point. The compact is, of course, a multi-stakeholder initiative. It is a way to, and it was launched at the Generation Equality Forum in Paris. It is a way to bring together all of the signatories, all of the stakeholders on the Women, Peace and Security and Humanitarian Action agenda. It involves member states, UN actors, regional organizations, civil society actors, with a specific emphasis on research and academic institutions and private sector actors, and says, look, we have so many commitments on women, peace and security and humanitarian action already. We are not getting this done. And this is the evidence that we see from so many situations around the world. So it brings together these actors and says, here's a framework for you to understand how you all need to work together, how the whole can be greater than the sum of its parts if we're all pulling in the same direction. And here's a 5-year time period for us all to come together and make this happen. So I'm going to end on my proselytizing on the compact, if you will, by just saying, we all need to be taking multiple actions at once. The saying in the United States is we all need to be chewing gum and walking at the same time, right? We need to be taking multiple action. We need to be taking the immediate action of responding to immediate crises, and we need to be addressing institutional barriers to women's leadership, participation rights, gender equality, economic empowerment. So I'm going to end here. I just want to say again how much I appreciate the conversation this morning. So thank you.
Thank you, Sarah, for your intervention. We have 15 minutes before we close. I'd like to pose a question relating to the matter of acceleration. And I think we've all heard very loud and clear the injunction and the advice given by the Deputy Prime Minister of Namibia, and thank you again for making it. We expect in times of turmoil that opportunities arise and we can see breakthroughs in the way that these countries represented here, and perhaps most notably by Sweden, have led by example. Every country is making progress which is admirable. Also pointed out, and I think this was also amplified by what Kat and Sarah were saying, that in the women, peace and security sphere, we don't see actions that match the words, and we need to sort of think along the lines of what Sarah was saying. I'd like to take this a little further. If I put my human rights hat on, it's easy for us on thematic issues to make powerful statements. What is often then a problem, if I can put it like this, is when we meet a hard case. And a hard case is not a particular situation where the state is weak or the state to whom we're directing comments or the entity within it is weak. It's a state with whom we are friendly with whom we have a trading relationship with, a military relationship, and where we see enormous difficulties when it comes not just to female representation, but the way in which an opposition is treated. It may not be conflict, maybe pre-conflict, but the women are there. They're in prison. They are active. They are vocal. And there is silence from the rest of us because the country is of strategic importance or close to the West. And I can tell you, in the Human Rights Council, there was a joint letter on such an issue that was dropped, and not one country supported it, not one. So I think the thing that I keep thinking about is how then do we marshal this energy? I mean, Sweden's leadership is extraordinary. How do we go from example here and then put it into a political moment where we take on a hard case? And yes, there may be a price to pay, but we're willing to pay it. Also, I'm going to throw it back into your lap because you were the one who raised it.
Well, thank you very much. That is a very difficult one, but it's also about that. I mean, it's not worth so much if we only talk about sunny days. We need to have strategies when things are difficult. And I think that, well, I want to thank again both IPI and Sweden for organizing this, because I think that since Sweden started with the concept of a feminist foreign policy, it also came with a manual, you could say, about rights, representation, and resources. I was in that cabinet at the same time, full disclosure, but I think that those 3 R's are R's we should be working with. And when we do the analysis from UN Women's side, we see that, as I said, there is a lot of rhetorics, and we like that. It's good. It starts with words. But at some point, there has to be implementation, and those 3 R's is really what it is about. So it is to defend those rights when it is difficult. It is about resources which are lacking. They are actually lacking. And representation, as we know, is also lacking, and we see other solutions sometimes, like women are part of advisory boards and stuff like that in peace talks. Probably better than nothing, but it's not really what we mean, is it, when we talk about women's representation? So I think that, again, partnerships, which is sometimes a word we use, and it can mean anything, but I do think to get together countries with a feminist foreign policy, perhaps together with countries with a big Muslim population, working on something together, finding those who are a bit unexpected, things like that, and then really putting money into it, because most countries actually have budgets, and budget priorities are done on a daily basis. I know that because I've been in that situation, but gender equality very seldom gets the money. So gender budgeting and rights is something that is very connected, and then also always to not only consult with, but open doors for civil society and women's organizations. Have them with you. Be happy that they demand and claim things, because that can be used. I am happy, I wanted to say that the last point, others want to come in on this as well, that there is a lot of interest and engagement here on Afghanistan and women's rights there. I think that's very, very encouraging, and that is a result. Most of all, the women's movement make us discuss these things. So it is possible to change the political agenda. But at UN Women, we have actually, every General Assembly, we go through the speeches from the heads of states and governments to see whether gender equality, women's rights, etc., is a big topic. This year, it has not been. So Afghanistan is something that is being discussed, which is good, and women's rights are highlighted. But gender equality, the way we're talking about it now, has not been particularly high on the agendas of heads of states and governments. And this is just, to me, that's the gap again. So, I mean, it is what several of you said, it's about everything at the same time. To close that gap, and when it is a important political issue, like in Afghanistan, then you do have a lot of people asking for it, Zeid. But so that would be my very simple advice to do everything. Thank you.
Well, I think clearly building coalitions around a nucleus of determined countries that put this issue at the core of their foreign policy, it must be the way to go. It must be. And having consistency, moral consistency across the board. So you're not picking and choosing certain situations which are easy politically, and then avoiding those because you know you're going to come into contact with a certain part of your private sector, the defense establishment, and so forth, and then avoid them. And I think that's, if we can make progress there, we're really doing well. And these are the countries that can do this. And I see the Foreign Minister Linda shaking her head. Would you like to touch on it?
No, I think it is very important, but also I think you have to be smart.
No.
I mean, if you're in the government, just holding up a poster saying we're against this will lead nothing.
No.
So you have to see how can we reach this or that country, and just to push and say you're doing wrong. That's not the way to go for a serious foreign minister. At the same time, you have to be, consistent in what are your goals and what do you want. And I think, for example, now we can see in Belarus that the demonstration against the Lukashenko regime was led by women. And if it wasn't for the women, it has never been so big in the whole population. And now we have, of the three leaders, we have two in exile, and we have one who was just sentenced to 12 years in prison. And of course, it is important that so many countries has received, for example, Svetlana Tikhanovskaya, and lifting the case of Belarus, even if we know that that is annoying to Russia, that is the closest partner to Belarus. So of course you should not be afraid of raising the issue, but you should do it in a way that it gets result and not in other ways. I also think that we need to. When we have a feminist foreign policy, to insist that it's also not just words. There are some countries now who said that they're interested in foreign policy, feminist foreign policy. I really hope that more governments would do that in a serious way. But I'm not interested in governments who want to have the stamp, we have a feminist foreign policy, but we don't do the work. I mean, that is more doing more harm than doing good. And finally, I think we need to involve men in the work. And when all of us sitting here are in women leadership positions, and then we also have to do things where we kind of get men into it. So it's not like we only discuss that among women. As one small example, now I'm the chair of the OSCE, and every year there is a military advisors meeting in the country, and they are all men. And this time I have said in the program that we should go to the center of the Nordic Center for Gender in Military Operations, and they will have a play, like you always have in military, what happened when there is sexual harassments and gender-based violence in a military operation. And they are shown it, on a screen, and then everybody has to discuss that. And I think that when we as women leaders are kind of insisting on really feminist issues also for the men, that is also something very important. But because in the end, we can never reach gender equality if we don't get the men on board.
Mm. You remind me, Minister, how there's so many studies now that convey the extent to which diversity and inclusion practices or policies within the corporate sector are failing, precisely because, as you said, it's just fairly crude just forcing opinions upon someone who naturally will reject them. And so they will tick the box and say, we did the training and we appreciate it, but they're not convinced. And what these studies are beginning to show is that it has to be slower, it has to be sort of more informal and over a longer period of time. And I think what you're saying about the smart approach to the way that one structures this rings true. And I think probably for not just in terms of governments and WPS, but beyond governments in the corporate sector as well. Yeah. Would anyone like to make any final remark? We're getting close to the end. Deputy Prime Minister?
No, thank you very much. Once again, I really want to thank the organizers. I agree that, having a policy is one thing, implementing is another. And I believe that a policy not implemented is just as good as there's no policy. And there's no point that we have all the documents, good of them talking about women empowerment, gender equality, participation of women in peace, but in the real life, nothing is happening. Meanwhile, we have also seen how the participation of women can really make a difference. I can give you 2 examples. When Liberia was coming from the Taylor administration, it was a group of women African leaders who went to Liberia, and then they assisted the incoming president, and it became very successful. The same can be said in Rwanda. After the genocide in Rwanda, I remember working with Madame Mongela. We organizing a women conference in Rwanda just to assist. And how did it came? It's because Rwanda had a very young foreign minister, a minister responsible for women. She came to the General Assembly for the first time. She was literally like crying to say that, how do I go about it? And then we agreed to support her. We should organize a conference there. And it has really helped how the women of Rwanda has picked up. So it is very important that we have a clear strategy, and we should do it not in a way of trying to see wrong on others, but it's in a way of accommodating one another. I mentioned our peace, International Women Peace Center, and we really believe that we want the whole, those who are involved in peace operations to be in, particularly the Minister of Defense, the Minister of Safety and Security, which is responsible for police. So currently, as I'm talking, they have all attached staff to the International Women Peace Center. Of course, the defense, the staff they attached is a man, which is good. And that's what we are talking, that they should also be on the table. I have set up an advisory group of people who are assisting me in developing the program of the center. And it's a mix of both men and women. So really, we need to make sure that for us to be successful, we should not work in isolation. Everybody has to buy in terms of operationalization, and make sure that we have achieved what we want. And that is what is necessary in the multilateral. If somebody now is looking to our panel, I'm sure they are asking a question because it's not really a balance, but it has come because of the responsibility that we are having. It's not because it was designed to say that it should only be women, but it's because of the designation. And that's what sometimes we see, as Linda was talking about the event he was attending, the defense, because it's their designation. That's what they are. So working together, networking, be strategic and to be focused, and to try to be as inclusive as possible might take us somewhere in ensuring that the gender parity is entrenched in all our activities. And once again, I want to thank the center that you always bring us here. Last time I asked a question, which I'm still going to ask, to leave it with the center. Why, when we talk about conflict, particularly when we talk about conflict, prolonged conflicts are happening in areas where there are strategic resources. I asked it the other time I was here. I'm still going to leave it to the center because I seriously want the center to look into this issue if we can find a solution to prolong the conflicts.
Deputy Prime Minister, consider me to be one of your citizens. The instruction has been received. We are going to look at this issue. So next year, I hope you will be entirely satisfied with the body of work we'll do. But thank you for that. And we've now reached the end of our time. I hope our online audience have found this distinguished panel as stimulating in the production of its thinking, of its thoughts, but most especially just by the example that these leaders are investing not just in their personal and individual capacity, but as representatives of their people. And it's a huge honor for IPI to be hosting this every year in conjunction with the government of Sweden. And I now finally have the privilege of turning over the floor for the last few comments by Foreign Minister Linda.
Thank you very much. Yes, and I'm very happy that so many has followers online, and I think that this discussion reveals that we are all involved in the effort to support women's leadership and influence, and also the local and regional level are extremely important if we should get the implementation. And this gives me actually hope, and in particular I'm happy to have heard from my co-panelists that there is emphasis on the importance of assuming leadership for women's leadership and supporting women's rights organization, and also that we need to work systematically. We need to take this work forward and make women's leadership and influence self-evident part of every society and in every phase. That is the only way that we can ever hope to reach sustainable peace, security, and development for all. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.